Hello, America, and welcome to the program. Tonight's opening is more of a personal note for an audience of one, a friend of mine, who I now can say is a friend of mine, who used to be apparently a mortal enemy, and was one of the guys who used to say that I was an anti-Semite, et cetera, and we got together years later, and we've talked, and we realized we're really not that different. We just speak different languages. Well, he wrote to me and he said, Glenn, why are you using an anti-Semitic trope, the puppet master? I said, I think this deserves a real response. So tonight, this is my response. Almost 2 weeks ago, on the final day of the House impeachment inquiry testimony, we heard from Fiona Hill. Now, she is the former National Security Council Director for Russia, who resigned from the Trump administration in July. Now, maybe it was the British accent, but she seemed quite sincere and believable through much of her marathon testimony. Until this thing right at the very end of the day. Listen.
These different theories, these conspiracy theories that have been targeting you, spun in part by folks like Mr. Stone, as well as fueled by Rudy Giuliani and others, basically have a tinge of anti-Semitism to them at least?
Well, certainly when they involve George Soros, they do. I'd just like to point out that in the early 1900s, the Tsarist secret police produced something called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which actually you can still obtain on the internet, and you can buy it actually sometimes in bookshops in Russia and elsewhere. This is the longest running anti-Semitic trope that we have in history. And the trope against Mr. Soros, George Soros, was also created for political purposes. And this is the new Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I'd actually intended to write something about this before I was actually invited to come into the administration because it's an absolute outrage.
All right, this very proper, professional, credible-sounding woman suddenly breaks character for a moment, swerves into conspiracy theory territory. And did you catch what she was saying? That any attack on George Soros is the new Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is nonsense. What she's saying is an attack on George Soros is simply an anti-Semitic propaganda. It is not true. Now, no one has challenged her assumption. Her statement just got a typical rubber stamp from the Democrats, from the media, and it was a dog pile. In this case, any criticism of George Soros can automatically be dismissed because it's based on anti-Semitism, and it's just part of the same century-old fake news Protocols of the Elders of Zion conspiracy. Now, why would she stick up for George Soros like this? Why would she say this? She's passionate. Well, she should be. Yesterday's program, we pieced together why she might be inclined to defend so vehemently George Soros. She used to work for him, so she knows him. If you missed that episode, you can go back and catch it on blazetv.com. So what was Fiona Hill talking about when she mentioned the Protocols of the Elders of Zion? Well, I hate to give it any kind of push, but there is no credibility behind it. The protocols were a set of fake documents first published in Russia in 1903. The exact author is unknown, but multiple U.S. and international authorities have found the documents to be fake and have tied their creation to the Russian Tsar's secret police. The Russians are the ones who first published the protocols, admitted that they had never seen the original manuscript. They just came into possession of copies of the original. How convenient. All of those who have promoted protocols over the last 116 years claim that the documents are minutes of a secret meeting of a powerful Jewish cabal in which they laid out their plans to take over the world, subjugate all people under Jewish rule, I think drink children's blood, the blood of Christians. They would accomplish all of these things, including taking over the world's press and economies through the creative use of liquor, the corruption of women, destruction of morals, and blowing up certain European capitals. It sounds insanely stupid because it is. Nevertheless, the communists took control of Russia and they continued to push the protocols. Nazi Germany did the same thing, except they added a little more of their own embellishments. By 1964, the protocols had been viral for long enough that the U.S. Senate put a committee together, and they published a report thoroughly debunking these documents. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is utterly ridiculous, and yet Fiona Hill is right about it still being passed around on the internet today. Many in the Middle East continue to use these. She's also right that some attacks on George Soros may be rooted in anti-Semitism. But legitimate criticisms of George Soros, like the kind I have tried to do, is not related to, nor is it motivated by any anti-Semitism or these phony protocols in any way whatsoever. Any sane person who looks at these protocols for 2 seconds can tell it's a total anti-Semitic garbage. Yet, leaders in the Arab world continue to endorse it as proof of a legitimate Jewish plan for world domination. Nazis are still running around. They still use it. I want to be clear. Actual anti-Semitism is very real. It's an ongoing menace, and it is getting worse in the world. I've pointed this out on my radio and TV program for over a decade and a half. It is hardcore, it is vile, disgusting, and it usually looks something like this. Real anti-Semitism looks like the Tree of Life synagogue attack that killed 11 worshipers in Pittsburgh last year. Real anti-Semitism looks like the attack last Friday on an Orthodox rabbi visiting London from Israel. The rabbi was reportedly beaten by 2 attackers who yelled, "Kill Jews, F Jews." This is the kind of stark, threatening anti-Semitism that is alive and growing in the world right now. And this is real. And it is frightening to think about it for me and my children. I cannot imagine if you are Jewish. Just after Fiona Hill's testimony in the House, our friends at Media Matters tweeted side-by-side screen grabs from my 2010 Fox News special on George Soros and said our most recent Blaze TV special about George Soros' involvement in Ukraine was the same. They were trying to revive the effort to brand me as an anti-Semite. Same song, different verse. This started a wave of online chatter about the puppet master imagery and the long history of its use as an anti-Semitic trope. I am not downplaying that ugly history in the least. I never have. But I'm not going to die on my sword for calling George Soros the puppet master. So what do I do? In doing so in 2010 or 2019 has absolutely nothing to do with anti-Semitism. Saying that will never convince Media Matters of the world, but I don't care about them. Been there, done that. But I am confident that the facts I presented over the years about Soros speak for themselves, and they are devoid of anti-Semitism. Can we pause for a moment first and remember what puppet master really means? It's a broadly used term in culture to communicate the idea of controlling or manipulating things. It is far from being exclusively anti-Semitic. For instance, this cartoon of Franklin Roosevelt as a puppet master. Is it anti-Semitic? He wasn't Jewish. Is My Fair Lady anti-Semitic? This is a movie poster. Puppet master imagery is right there. It doesn't make it anti-Semitic. Is it anti-Semitic to call Steve Bannon a puppet master? There's even a Marvel Comics villain called Puppet Master. And perhaps the most famous use in American culture anyway of a puppet master imagery is the iconic movie poster of The Godfather. See the hand there? It was also on the cover of Mario Puzo's original Godfather's novel. Yet there's nothing Jewish about the Corleone family. The Godfather concept is what I mean by George Soros' role. I meant that in 2010. I mean that today. It is an accurate description of what he does. Now, maybe I should have called him the Godfather instead of the puppet master, although I probably would have been sued by Paramount, and I think I'm afraid of the Paramount. No, Disney lawyers, then Soros, then Paramount. Listen, for any honest members of the Jewish community who are understandably fearful of the world that we are entering, I understand. And I'm not going to use puppet master again to describe George Soros. I may use it to describe someone else, but I understand your fear. This is a real threat. Many have been telling me this was a bogus threat for 15 plus years. I am not dropping it because I buy into Media Matters or its allies, but because of my profound respect of history and my love for our Jewish friends who have legitimate fears of another program, Roundup, or Holocaust. And I will play no role in that. With that said, exposing the work of George Soros has absolutely nothing to do with his ethnicity or his background. It has nothing to do with his religion, which he doesn't embrace anyway. This is a guy whose personal hobby, according to him, is toppling foreign governments. He says he enjoys it, especially the revolutionary parts. He is partners with the U.S. State Department, and he has set up new governments and implement his agenda around the world. That is the epitome of the Godfather type manipulator, you know, without the murders. But now, pointing this out has nothing to do with his Jewish heritage. The protocols of the Elders of Zion were completely made-up fairy tales, but Soros's manipulations are well-established facts. He is not welcome in many countries around the world. It is not a plot ripped from a fairy tale that Soros engineers the hostile takeovers of entire countries. It's right there in his own words, right here. This document outlines the entire process from beginning to end. It shows the entire process, and it was signed by George Soros. This is his document to the State Department. That's not a conspiracy theory. That is Soros doing what perhaps he thinks is right, but I do not, and I don't think most Americans would either, working through the United States State Department. Here is an email. There are many, many more. Here's just one that show him coordinating on a weekly basis with our State Department. We're not making this stuff up when we say that Soros and his penetration has reached the highest echelons of government throughout agencies such as the State Department. This is another document here showing direct communication between Victoria Nuland and Soros himself. Now, let me just ask you a simple question. Imagine the reaction from the left if we found these documents and these emails, but instead of being linked to George Soros, they were signed by the Koch brothers. The left would freak out. And they would be saying, he's plotting the overturn of entire countries. And they would be right. And I would be freaked out just as much as I am now. It's wrong. I don't care who does it. But instead of the Koch brothers, I'd call them puppet masters too. But because I know of the heritage, I will say Michael and Sonny Corleone. But the evidence doesn't support the Koch brothers. All the facts point back to Don Vito himself, George Soros. In today's political environment, trying to explain your position, a position that the left doesn't like, with old-fashioned things like, I don't know, facts and verified documents, is like bringing a toothpick to a gunfight. The left has already made up its mind, and it's out to destroy anyone who tries to change people's minds. Doesn't matter if they have the facts. And when the left disapproves of what you have to say, it skips reason and dialogue and goes straight into ism labels to shut you down. Racism, nativism, anti-Semitism, Nazism, homophobia, which is not really an ism, but a bia, and I didn't think that really sounded good. Anyway, what's the point in bothering to even defend myself? I'm not defending myself. I don't think I have anything to defend. I do have a message to my friend. I hear you. I don't agree, but I understand history. And because of that, I don't want you or your family afraid of any of the things that are happening. I will stand with you. I have long been fueled by a belief one that gets harder and harder to hold on to every day. But the truth does triumph in the end. That the critics will bash you for a while, but that eventually the honest ones would evaluate your case fairly, without it being tainted by the cartoon version of you. And believe me, there are tons of cartoon versions of me. Maybe when they stop looking at the cartoon versions of you, they will start to listen and look at the actual facts, and they will see that it wasn't about you at all. But too many critics simply are not interested in the truth. My friend who wrote me, I believe, is. To him, to his family, to them. I will always be true to my word. To the others who don't care to listen, I will always be called an anti-Semite because it's exactly what they want and need me to be. Back in a minute.